Marcus Chen stared at the Japanese contract that could cost him everything, $400 million hanging in the balance as foreign characters blurred before his eyes. The elegant restaurant buzzed with the energy of a deal about to close, while 7-year-old Lily watched from the shadows, her mother serving tables with exhausted grace. But no one imagined what would come next. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany table at Le Bernardin as Marcus Chen, 31 years old and worth $2. 8 billion, stared at the documents that could either make him richer than his wildest dreams or destroy everything he'd built. His steel-grey suit, tailored to perfection on Savile Row, couldn't hide the tension radiating from his broad shoulders as he faced Hiroshi Tanaka across the polished surface. "Mr. Chen, this partnership will revolutionize the renewable energy sector," Tanaka said, his English crisp but heavily accented. The Japanese CEO's smile was warm, but Marcus had learned to read people's intentions in the subtle details. The way Tanaka's fingers drummed against his briefcase, the micro-expressions that flickered across his weathered face. Something felt off, but Marcus couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The contract lay between them like a sleeping serpent, 47 pages of dense Japanese text that Marcus had foolishly agreed to review in its original language. His legal team had assured him that preliminary translations looked favorable, but this final version contained amendments that Tanaka insisted were minor clarifications. Marcus had built his empire on solar panel manufacturing, transforming a small startup into a global powerhouse. But he'd never mastered reading Japanese contracts, despite years of business dealings in Tokyo. "The investment structure is particularly favorable," Tanaka continued, pointing to a section filled with complex kanji characters. "Your initial $400 million will secure a 60% stake in our lithium mining operations in Hokkaido. The projected returns over 5 years exceed your most optimistic projections by 40%. Marcus nodded, trying to project confidence, while internally screaming at his dependence on others to interpret the legal language that would bind his company for the next decade. His grandfather had always warned him, "Never sign anything you can't read yourself, boy. That's how empires fall." But the opportunity was too massive to ignore. Rare earth minerals, essential for next-generation solar batteries, accessible through Tanaka's exclusive mining rights. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversations from Manhattan's elite, the soft clink of expensive silverware providing a sophisticated soundtrack to what could be the deal of the century. Marcus glanced around the dining room, noting the familiar faces of other billionaires, celebrities, and power brokers who frequented this establishment. This was his world, where $100 million handshakes happened over perfectly prepared seafood and aged wine. Near the kitchen doors, he noticed a young African-American woman moving gracefully between tables, her movements efficient despite the obvious exhaustion etched in her delicate features. She couldn't be older than 28, with kind eyes that seemed to carry more weight than someone her age should bear. Her uniform was impeccable, but Marcus could see the slight tremor in her hands that spoke of long hours and endless fatigue. A small figure darted between the tables, the waitress's daughter, probably around 7 years old, with bright, intelligent eyes and carefully braided hair adorned with small purple ribbons. The little girl moved with purpose, occasionally helping her mother by delivering water glasses or clearing empty plates, with surprising skill for someone so young. Marcus had seen her here before, during his previous meetings. The restaurant manager allowed the child to stay after school hours rather than leave her unsupervised. "Mr. Chen?" Tanaka's voice pulled his attention back to the contract. "Perhaps we could finalize this today. My board of directors is eager to begin the extraction process before winter sets in." Marcus felt the familiar weight of decision pressing against his chest. Every instinct screamed caution, but the numbers were undeniable. 400 million was significant even for him, but the potential returns could triple his renewable energy division's value within 18 months. His advisors had spent weeks analyzing Tanaka's company, verifying the mining claims, confirming the geological surveys. Everything checked out perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. "The timeline is aggressive," Marcus said, stalling while trying to decode the subtle wrongness he sensed in Tanaka's demeanor. "My CFO will want to review the liability clauses one more time." "Naturally, but the opportunity window is narrow. Chinese competitors are already approaching our government contacts. Delay could mean losing this chance entirely." Tanaka's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Mr. Chen, in business, hesitation is often more dangerous than calculated risk." The little girl appeared again at the edge of Marcus's vision, carefully balancing a tray of water glasses that seemed comically large in her small hands. She moved with unusual grace for a 7-year-old, her concentration absolute as she navigated between chairs and briefcases. Marcus found himself momentarily distracted by her determination. Something about her focused intensity reminded him of himself at that age, already driven to prove himself worthy of his family's expectations. "Your daughter is quite helpful," Marcus commented to the waitress as she refilled his water glass. "Thank you, sir. Lily's very responsible for her age." The woman's voice carried a soft southern accent, warm despite her obvious exhaustion. "She likes to help after school instead of sitting alone." Marcus noticed the way the woman's eyes darted nervously toward her daughter, protective instincts clearly on high alert in this environment of wealth and power that she served but could never truly access. There was something admirable about her dignity in the face of such obvious economic disparity. She worked with pride, despite circumstances that had clearly tested her resolve. Tanaka cleared his throat impatiently. "Mr. Chen, shall we proceed?" The Japanese CEO's urgency struck Marcus as increasingly suspicious. In his experience, legitimate opportunities didn't require such aggressive timelines. The best deals were like fine wine. They improved with patience and careful consideration. But the numbers, those incredible projected returns, kept pulling his attention back to the contract's promising figures. Marcus picked up his Mont Blanc pen, its familiar weight usually comforting, but now feeling like a potential weapon of self-destruction. $400 million. The number echoed in his mind like a mantra or a curse. His company's liquid assets could absorb the loss if things went wrong, but barely. This single decision could either establish him as a visionary leader in sustainable energy or reduce him to a cautionary tale told in business schools for generations. The little girl had moved closer to their table now, standing quietly beside her mother as the woman arranged the dessert service on the neighboring table. Marcus caught the child studying their documents with unusual intensity, her young eyes moving across the Japanese characters with an expression of concentration that seemed far too mature for someone her age. "The mineral composition analysis confirms unprecedented lithium density," Tanaka said, spreading geological surveys across the table. "Your solar battery division will have exclusive access to materials that could revolutionize energy storage capacity." Marcus studied the charts, noting impressive specifications that aligned perfectly with his company's research and development goals. Everything looked legitimate, verified by independent analysts, supported by government documentation. So why did his gut keep warning him to walk away? The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade as Marcus considered his options. Sign the contract and potentially secure his company's dominance in renewable energy for the next decade. Walk away and possibly regret missing the opportunity of a lifetime. His grandfather's voice echoed again. Trust your instincts, boy. They've kept our family alive through 3 generations of building this empire. But his instincts were clouded by the sheer magnitude of potential profits and the fear of letting competitors seize this advantage. Marcus had built his reputation on bold decisions that others considered too risky, turning calculated gambles into industry-defining victories. This felt like another such moment, the kind of crossroads that separated true visionaries from timid followers. The little girl stepped forward slightly, her attention still focused on the Japanese documents with an intensity that finally registered as unusual, even in Marcus's distracted state. Most 7-year-olds would be playing games on a phone or coloring in a book, not studying legal contracts written in a foreign language with such concentrated focus. Tanaka followed Marcus's gaze to the child and smiled indulgently. Children are naturally curious about adult business, aren't they? But the girl's expression wasn't mere curiosity. It was recognition, understanding, and something that looked increasingly like concern. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that this 7-year-old was actually reading the Japanese text, her eyes moving with the practiced rhythm of someone comprehending every word. The enormity of that realization hit him like a physical blow. If this child could read Japanese fluently enough to understand legal documents, and if her expression suggested problems with the contract's contents, then perhaps his instincts about Tanaka's urgency were more accurate than his advisor's enthusiastic recommendations. Marcus set down his pen and looked directly at the little girl, whose intelligent eyes met his with startling directness. In that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me, sweetheart," Marcus said gently, his voice cutting through the restaurant's sophisticated murmur. Every instinct he'd developed through 15 years of high-stakes negotiations was screaming that this 7-year-old held answers he desperately needed. "You've been looking at these papers pretty closely. Can you read what they say?" Lily glanced nervously at her mother, who stepped forward with obvious anxiety. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen." "Lily, come help me with the next table." Charisse Washington had worked at Le Bernardin for 3 years, and she knew better than to let her daughter disturb the wealthy clientele during their business dealings. "Actually, I'd like to hear what she has to say," Marcus said, his billionaire's confidence making the request sound more like a polite command. He'd learned that money gave him the privilege of indulging curiosities that others might dismiss. If she can read Japanese, that would be quite remarkable. Tanaka's carefully maintained smile flickered for the first time that evening. "Mr. Chen, surely we don't need to involve children in our business discussion. The contract has been reviewed by your legal team, has it not?" "Oh," but Marcus was already studying Lily's face, noting the way her dark eyes moved across the kanji characters with unmistakable comprehension. His grandmother had taught him to read people's micro-expressions, a skill that had served him well in boardrooms around the world. This child wasn't pretending to understand. She was genuinely processing complex legal language in a foreign script. "How did you learn to read Japanese?" Marcus asked, ignoring Tanaka's obvious discomfort. Lily looked again at her mother, who nodded reluctantly. The little girl's voice was clear and confident despite her obvious nervousness. "I taught myself, sir. Mama works with lots of Japanese customers, and they always seemed frustrated when she couldn't understand them. So I thought if I learned their language, I could help her." The simplicity of that explanation hit Marcus like a revelation. While he'd been struggling with cross-cultural business communications despite his billion-dollar resources, this 7-year-old had mastered a foreign language out of love for her overworked mother. The contrast between his privileged struggles and her selfless dedication was both humbling and astounding. "How long have you been studying?" Marcus pressed, genuinely curious now about this remarkable child's background. "About 2 years, Lily said, her confidence growing. "I use library books and YouTube videos. There's this really nice Japanese lady at the Midtown branch who helps me practice on Saturdays. Cherise's eyes filled with pride and embarrassment in equal measure. She's always been different, learns things faster than seems normal. Teachers say she reads at a high school level already. Tanaka shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly eager to redirect the conversation back to the contract. This is quite touching, Mr. Chen, but perhaps we could... What does this section say? Marcus interrupted, pointing to a paragraph that had been highlighted in their earlier discussion. His business instincts were now fully engaged, recognizing that this unexpected opportunity for independent translation could resolve his nagging doubts about the deal. Lily studied the text carefully, her young face serious with concentration. Marcus watched her eyes move left to right across the Japanese characters, noting the way she occasionally paused to consider more complex kanji before continuing. The level of comprehension she was demonstrating seemed impossible for someone her age, yet her translation was clearly genuine. It says the mining rights are only valid for 6 months from signing, Lily said slowly, her finger following the text, and that the Japanese company keeps 70% of all profits, not 40% like that man said earlier. Oh, the restaurant seemed to freeze around Marcus as the implications of Lily's translation crashed over him like a tsunami. Tanaka had specifically stated that the American company would maintain 60% ownership with 5-year guaranteed access to the mining sites. If this 7-year-old was correct, then the contract was essentially a sophisticated trap designed to steal his $400 million investment. That can't be right, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper as the magnitude of the attempted fraud became clear. Tanaka's face had gone pale, his practiced composure finally cracking under the pressure of being exposed by a child. Mr. Chen, surely you can't be taking business advice from a 7-year-old. My company has provided certified translations. Keep reading, Marcus told Lily, his tone now sharp with barely controlled anger. Years of building his empire through careful deals and calculated risks had nearly been destroyed by trusting the wrong people. Only this child's unexpected intervention had saved him from financial disaster. Lily continued translating, her voice growing more confident as she recognized the importance of her role. This part says all disputes must be resolved in Japanese courts under Japanese law, and here it says the American partner has no rights to inspect the mining operations or verify production numbers. Each revelation felt like another nail in Tanaka's coffin of deception. Marcus had survived and thrived in business by learning to recognize patterns of fraud, but this scheme had been sophisticated enough to fool his experienced legal team. The irony that a 7-year-old's pure curiosity had uncovered what MBA-educated lawyers had missed wasn't lost on him. Furthermore, Lily continued, now fully absorbed in the document analysis, it says the initial payment is non-refundable regardless of mining results, and the American company is responsible for all environmental cleanup costs, even though they don't control the operations. And Marcus felt his hands clench into fists as the full scope of Tanaka's attempted theft became clear. $400 million would have vanished into a labyrinth of legal protections that favored the Japanese company exclusively. Worse, his company would have been liable for environmental damages from mining operations they couldn't even monitor or control. Tanaka made one last desperate attempt to salvage his scheme. Mr. Chen, please be reasonable. Child translations cannot possibly be accurate for complex legal terminology. We should rely on professional liars, you mean? Marcus stood up, his 6'2" frame towering over the table as righteous anger replaced his earlier uncertainty. How many other American companies have you defrauded with these fake contracts? The Japanese CEO's mask of respectability finally dropped completely, revealing the calculating criminal underneath. "You have no proof of anything improper. My legal team will... Your legal team will be explaining this to federal prosecutors," Marcus said coldly. He pulled out his phone and began photographing every page of the fraudulent contract. Interstate wire fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, probably a dozen other felonies. Charisse had been watching this drama unfold with growing amazement and terror. Her daughter had somehow exposed a massive fraud, potentially saving this billionaire hundreds of millions of dollars. The implications for their own lives were staggering and completely unpredictable. Lily, meanwhile, continued studying the documents with scholarly intensity. "There's more, sir. This section talks about subsidiary companies in the Cayman Islands that would receive most of the mining profits. And there's a clause that says if the American partner tries to withdraw from the agreement, they forfeit their entire investment plus an additional penalty fee." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. The sophistication of this fraud was remarkable, layers upon layers of legal traps designed to ensure that once he signed, his money would be gone forever, with no legal recourse. Only Lily's innocent curiosity and remarkable linguistic abilities had prevented a financial catastrophe that would have damaged his company for decades. Tanaka gathered his documents hastily, clearly recognizing that his scheme had been thoroughly exposed. "This is a misunderstanding that can be resolved through proper channels. The only thing being resolved is your arrest," Marcus said, already dialing his head of security. "I want building security to detain Mr. Tanaka until the FBI arrives." The transformation in the restaurant's atmosphere was dramatic. Other diners had begun to notice the confrontation, their conversations dropping to whispers as they recognized the billion-dollar drama unfolding at the corner table. Marcus's reputation in New York's financial circles meant that news of this attempted fraud would spread through the business community within hours. Lily looked up at Marcus with wide eyes, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she'd uncovered. "Did I do something wrong, sir?" "On the contrary," Marcus said, his voice soft with genuine gratitude. "You just saved my company from the biggest fraud in its history." As security guards arrived to escort Tanaka away, Marcus found himself staring at this remarkable 7-year-old who had single-handedly prevented his financial destruction. Lily's mother stood beside her, tears streaming down her face as she realized that her daughter's innocent curiosity had just changed their lives in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. But Marcus was already formulating plans that would ensure this family's sacrifice and brilliance would be properly rewarded. The FBI arrived at Le Bernardin within 30 minutes, their presence transforming the elegant restaurant into the center of what would become one of the largest international fraud investigations in recent history. Agent Sarah Martinez, a seasoned white-collar crime specialist, listened intently as Marcus explained how a 7-year-old girl had exposed Tanaka's elaborate scheme. "Mr. Chen, you're claiming that this child prevented a $400 million fraud?" Agent Martinez asked, her professional skepticism evident despite the overwhelming evidence spread across the table. "Not claiming, stating as fact," Marcus replied firmly. He gestured toward Lily, who sat quietly beside her mother, still processing the magnitude of the evening's events. Lily's translation revealed discrepancies that my entire legal team missed. Without her intervention, I would have signed away my company's future. Charisse Washington watched the federal agents photograph the fraudulent contracts, her mind racing with the implications of her daughter's actions. 3 years of serving wealthy clientele at Le Bernardin had taught her that the rich lived in a different world, with different rules. Now, somehow, Lily had stepped into that world and potentially saved one of its most powerful members from disaster. Agent Martinez knelt down to Lily's eye level, her voice gentle but thorough. "Can you tell me how you learned to read Japanese so well?" Lily's answer came with the straightforward honesty that only children possess. "My mama works really hard, but Japanese customers get frustrated when she can't understand them. I thought if I learned their language, I could help her serve them better, and maybe she wouldn't have to work so many hours." The federal agent exchanged glances with her partner, recognizing the extraordinary nature of this child's motivation and abilities. "How many hours do you study Japanese each week?" "Every day after school until Mama's shift ends," Lily said matter-of-factly. "Usually about 4 hours, sometimes more on weekends. The library has really good books, and there are Japanese conversation groups that meet on Saturdays." Marcus felt his chest tighten as he processed the full picture of this family's situation. While he'd been complaining about the inconvenience of reading foreign contracts, this 7-year-old had dedicated thousands of hours to mastering a difficult language purely to help her overworked mother provide better service to customers who would never appreciate her sacrifice. "Mrs. Washington," Agent Martinez addressed Charisse directly, "how many hours do you typically work here?" Charisse's voice was barely above a whisper, embarrassment and pride warring in her expression. 16 hours most days, sometimes 18 during busy periods. I work the lunch shift and the dinner shift with a 2-hour break between. It's the only way to make enough to cover our rent and Lily's school expenses." The mathematics of survival hit Marcus like a physical blow. This woman was working nearly twice as many hours as most full-time employees, earning wages that barely covered basic living expenses in Manhattan, while her daughter studied languages in restaurant corners and library buildings. The contrast with his own privileged upbringing was stark and humbling. Agent Martinez's partner, Agent Rodriguez, had been examining the fraudulent contracts with growing amazement. The sophistication of this scheme is remarkable. The fake legal language is nearly perfect. It would have fooled most professional translators without careful line-by-line analysis. "How did you know to read it so carefully?" Marcus asked Lily, genuinely curious about her analytical process. "The man seemed nervous when you asked questions," Lily said, her observation skills remarkably mature for her age. "And he kept looking at his watch like he was in a hurry. Mama taught me that when people are rushing you to make important decisions, you should slow down and read everything twice." Charisse nodded, her pride in her daughter's wisdom evident despite their difficult circumstances. "I've seen enough wealthy customers make bad decisions when people pressure them. I always tell Lily to think carefully before trusting anyone who won't let you take your time." Marcus realized that this working-class family possessed wisdom about human nature that his expensive education and privileged upbringing had failed to provide. Lily's instincts about Tanaka's deception had been more accurate than his team of highly paid advisors, primarily because she'd approached the situation without the assumptions and biases that came with formal business training. "Mr. Chen," Agent Martinez said, "will need detailed statements from all witnesses and will want to verify Lily's translation accuracy with certified interpreters. This case could set important precedents for international fraud prosecution." "Whatever you need," Marcus replied, his mind already working on longer-term implications. "I want Tanaka and his accomplices prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." As the federal agents continued their investigation, Marcus found himself studying Lily with growing fascination. Her intellectual capabilities were clearly exceptional, but what impressed him most was her motivation. Everything she'd learned was in service of helping her family survive and thrive. The purity of that dedication was something he rarely encountered in his world of calculated self-interest and strategic advantage. "Lily," Marcus said during a quiet moment, "what do you want to be when you grow up?" Her answer came without hesitation. "I want to help people communicate better so they don't misunderstand each other." maybe be a translator or a teacher or work at the United Nations. The scope of her ambitions, combined with her demonstrated abilities, convinced Marcus that this child possessed the potential to achieve extraordinary things given proper opportunities. But those opportunities would require resources that her mother's restaurant wages could never provide. Charisse noticed Marcus's intense focus on her daughter and felt a familiar protective instinct rising. She'd seen wealthy customers become interested in Lily before, and while their intentions were usually benign, the power differential always made her uncomfortable. Her daughter's brilliant mind was both a blessing and a vulnerability in a world where intelligence could be exploited as easily as celebrated. "Mrs. Washington," Marcus said carefully, recognizing the wariness in the mother's eyes, "I'd like to discuss some possibilities for Lily's education. She's clearly gifted far beyond typical grade levels." "Oh, we can't afford private schools or special programs," Charisse replied defensively. "But Lily's doing fine in her current school, and the public library provides plenty of learning opportunities." Marcus understood that his wealth could seem both like salvation and threat to this proud woman who had worked so hard to provide for her daughter independently. Approaching this conversation would require more delicacy than negotiating billion-dollar corporate acquisitions. "I'm not suggesting charity," Marcus said respectfully. "I'm suggesting investment in exceptional talent that just happened to save my company from disaster. Lily's abilities deserve development opportunities that match her potential." Agent Martinez had been listening to this exchange while completing her preliminary report. "Mr. Chen, Mrs. Washington, will need to schedule follow-up interviews over the next few weeks as this investigation develops. The case is likely to attract significant media attention given the dollar amounts involved." The prospect of media scrutiny sent a chill through Charisse's heart. She'd spent years trying to maintain privacy and normalcy for Lily, despite their challenging circumstances. Suddenly, finding themselves at the center of a high-profile fraud case could expose them to attention and pressures they weren't prepared to handle. Marcus recognized the mother's concern and made an immediate decision that would begin to change everything. "Agent Martinez, I'll be hiring private security for Mrs. Washington and Lily until this investigation concludes. They shouldn't face any risks because of their cooperation with federal law enforcement." "That's not necessary, Mr. Chen," Charisse said quickly, though her relief was evident. "We've managed fine on our own." "You've managed admirably," Marcus agreed, "but circumstances have changed. Lily's involvement in exposing this fraud makes your family potential targets for retaliation. Security isn't charity, it's common sense." As the evening wound down and the federal agents prepared to leave, Marcus realized that this chance encounter had revealed something more valuable than any business deal: the discovery of truly exceptional human potential trapped by economic circumstances. Lily's remarkable abilities, combined with her family's values, represented the kind of authentic excellence that his wealth could genuinely help nurture rather than simply acquire. But first, he needed to earn this proud family's trust and demonstrate that his interest in their welfare was genuine rather than another form of privileged exploitation. The next few days would determine whether this remarkable 7-year-old's life would continue in the shadows of economic struggle or emerge into the light of unlimited possibility. The real transformation was just beginning. 3 days after the FBI raid at Le Bernardin, Marcus Chen sat in his Manhattan penthouse office reviewing the preliminary investigation reports while contemplating a decision that could change 2 lives forever. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, Central Park stretched out below like a green carpet, but his attention was focused entirely on the psychological evaluation report Dr. Elizabeth Harper had prepared after spending 6 hours with Lily Washington. "Mr. Chen, This child's cognitive abilities are genuinely unprecedented. Doctor. Harper had explained during their phone call that morning. Her IQ measures at 187, which places her in the top 0.1% of the population globally. But more remarkable than her intelligence is her emotional maturity and intrinsic motivation to help others. Marcus reread the most stunning section of the report. Subject demonstrates native-level fluency in Japanese, Korean, Mandarin, Spanish, and French, with conversational abilities in Portuguese and Arabic. All languages were self-taught using public resources over a 2-year period. When asked about her learning methodology, Subject explained complex pattern recognition techniques that typically require graduate-level linguistic training. The implications were staggering. Lily hadn't just learned Japanese to help her mother. She had systematically mastered 7 languages using intellectual processes that most university professors never achieved. The fraud investigation had revealed a 7-year-old genius who had been hiding in plain sight, serving water glasses and clearing tables while possessing capabilities that could revolutionize international communication. Marcus's intercom buzzed. "Mr. Chen, Mrs. Washington and Lily are here for their appointment. Send them in, please." Marcus stood up, straightening his charcoal Tom Ford suit while trying to calm the nervous energy that had been building since he'd made his decision the previous evening. What he was about to propose would either be seen as genuine opportunity or unwelcome interference from someone who couldn't possibly understand their world. Charisse entered first, wearing her best dress, a simple navy blue outfit that Marcus recognized as probably her only formal clothing. Despite her obvious nervousness in his opulent office, she carried herself with the dignity that had impressed him during their first meeting. Lily followed closely, her curious eyes immediately scanning the bookshelves, artwork and technology that filled Marcus's workspace. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said warmly, gesturing toward the comfortable seating area near his desk. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. Can I offer you anything to drink?" "We're fine, thank you," Charisse replied, though her tension was evident in the way she kept glancing around the lavishly appointed office. Marcus's wealth was on full display here. Original Picasso paintings, rare first-edition books, furniture that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Lily, however, had moved directly to Marcus's desk, where several language dictionaries were displayed. "You have the complete Oxford English Dictionary," she observed with genuine excitement. "And is that the unabridged Kenkyusha Japanese English Dictionary? I've been wanting to see one of those for months." Marcus smiled at her enthusiasm. "Feel free to look at any of the books, Lily. That's what they're for." He turned to Charisse, recognizing that earning the mother's trust was essential to everything he hoped to accomplish. "Mrs. Washington, I asked you here because I have a proposition that I hope you'll consider carefully." Charisse's protective instincts immediately activated. "Mr. Chen, we're grateful for everything you've done, the security detail, helping with the FBI investigation, but we can't accept charity. Lily and I have always managed on our own." "This isn't charity," Marcus said respectfully. "It's an investment in exceptional talent that could benefit everyone involved." He pulled out a folder containing documents he'd had his lawyers prepare. "I'd like to establish an educational foundation specifically designed to develop Lily's linguistic abilities while ensuring your family's financial security." The room fell silent, except for the soft sound of Lily turning pages in the Japanese dictionary. Marcus watched Charisse's face carefully, noting the wariness that came from years of struggling to maintain independence despite overwhelming economic pressure. "What exactly are you proposing?" Charisse asked cautiously. Marcus had rehearsed this conversation multiple times, knowing that his approach needed to respect their pride while acknowledging their needs. "I want to create the Washington Foundation for Linguistic Excellence." You would serve as its executive director with a salary of $150,000 annually, plus benefits and a Manhattan apartment appropriate for your new position. Charisse's eyes widened in shock. Mr. Chen, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not qualified to run any kind of foundation. I'm a restaurant server with a high school education. Ui, you're the mother who raised a 7-year-old genius while working 16-hour days to keep your family together, Marcus replied firmly. You understand dedication, sacrifice, and the value of education better than most people with advanced degrees. The Foundation's mission would be developing programs for gifted children from working-class families, exactly the expertise you've been developing every day for 7 years. Lily looked up from the dictionary, having been listening intently to the adult conversation. Mama, he's saying you would help other kids like me get better chances to learn. Marcus nodded. Exactly, Lily. Your mother's experience navigating educational challenges with limited resources is invaluable knowledge. She knows what works and what doesn't when you're trying to maximize potential without unlimited budgets. Charisse felt tears threatening as the magnitude of Marcus's offer became clear. And Lily, what would happen to her education? Lily would attend the Dalton School, one of Manhattan's most prestigious institutions, with additional tutoring in linguistics from Columbia University professors, Marcus explained. But she'd continue living with you, maintaining the family bonds that have made her so remarkable. The Dalton School costs $50,000 a year, Charisse said quietly, plus university tutoring. Mr. Chen, this is too much. What do you expect in return? Marcus had anticipated this question and prepared his most honest answer. I expect Lily to continue being exactly who she is, a brilliant, compassionate child who uses her gifts to help others. The Foundation would document her educational progress and develop programs that could help other exceptional children from similar backgrounds. Lily had been studying the adult's expressions with her characteristic intensity. Mr. Chen, would I still be able to help Mama with her work? Your mother's new work would be helping families like yours, Marcus said gently. You'd be helping her in a different way, by proving that extraordinary potential exists everywhere if we know how to recognize and develop it. Charisse felt the weight of decision pressing against her chest. Everything Marcus was offering represented security and opportunity beyond her wildest dreams, but accepting would mean acknowledging that she couldn't provide these advantages for Lily independently. The pride that had sustained her through years of struggle was warring with maternal instincts that demanded she give her daughter every possible chance for success. Mrs. Washington, Marcus said softly, recognizing her internal conflict. I've spent my entire life in privilege, surrounded by opportunities that I took for granted. Lily saved my company not because of advantages I could give her, but because of values you taught her. This foundation isn't about changing who she is. It's about giving her tools worthy of her abilities. Can we think about it? Charisse asked, though Marcus could see in her eyes that she was already beginning to accept the reality of what this opportunity could mean for Lily's future. Of course. Take all the time you need. Marcus handed her the folder of Foundation documents. Everything is outlined here, including legal protections to ensure the Foundation serves Lily's interests rather than anyone else's agenda. Lily had moved to the window overlooking Central Park, her young mind clearly processing the conversation's implications. Mama, remember what you always tell me about helping people when we can? Charisse smiled despite her emotional turmoil. Her 7-year-old daughter was gently reminding her that accepting help could enable them to help others in return, a lesson Charisse had tried to teach through example, but hadn't expected to receive back so eloquently. Mr. Chen, Lily said, turning from the window with sudden excitement, if Mama runs this foundation, could we help kids learn languages like I did? There are probably lots of children who want to help their parents but don't know how to start. That's exactly what we do, Marcus confirmed, feeling his own excitement building as he saw Lily's mind engaging with the Foundation's possibilities. You could develop learning programs based on your own experience, create resources for other self-taught students, maybe even establish scholarship programs. The vision was becoming real for all three of them, a foundation that would transform Marcus's guilty wealth into genuine opportunity while honoring the values that had made this family so extraordinary. Charisse was beginning to see herself not as a charity recipient, but as an expert in maximizing potential despite limited resources. "There's something else," Marcus said, pulling out one final document. "The FBI investigation has revealed that Tanaka's scheme targeted 12 other American companies over the past 3 years. Your daughter's intervention prevented not just my loss, but potentially billions in additional fraud. The government is offering a whistleblower reward of $2, $5 million. Charisse felt the room spinning as she processed this additional revelation. $2.5 million. Which would be placed in trust for Lily's future education and provide your family with genuine financial independence, Marcus explained. Combined with the foundation position, you'd never again have to choose between Lily's needs and basic survival. Lily had been quietly calculating numbers in her head. "Mama, that means you could work normal hours like other parents. And I could go to a school where they have real language programs instead of just teaching Spanish in 6th grade." The simple wisdom of her daughter's observation finally broke through Charisse's remaining resistance. Everything Marcus was offering would give Lily advantages that her own sacrifices could never provide, while honoring rather than diminishing the values they'd built together through years of struggle. "Mr. Chen," Charisse said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes, "if you're serious about this foundation helping other families like ours, then we accept your offer." Marcus felt relief and excitement flooding through him as he realized that this remarkable family had just agreed to transform his wealth into something genuinely meaningful. But even he couldn't anticipate the discoveries about Lily's abilities that lay just ahead. 6 weeks later, Lily Washington sat in Columbia University's Advanced Linguistics Laboratory, surrounded by professors who were struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. Dr. Maria Santos, the department's leading expert in child language acquisition, watched in amazement as Lily simultaneously translated a complex technical document from Japanese to English while listening to a Mandarin audio recording and taking notes in French. "This shouldn't be physiologically possible," Dr. Santos murmured to her colleague, Dr. James Mitchell. "She's processing 3 different languages simultaneously at native speaker levels. Most polyglots require sequential focus to maintain accuracy." Marcus observed from the corner of the laboratory, equally fascinated by Lily's demonstration. Since establishing the Washington Foundation 6 weeks earlier, he'd witnessed dozens of evaluations and assessments, but today's session was revealing capabilities that transcended even their most optimistic projections. "Lily," Dr. Santos said gently, "can you explain what's happening in your mind while you're doing this?" Lily looked up from her work with the slight confusion of someone being asked to explain something that felt completely natural. It's like having different radio stations playing at the same time, but each one has its own frequency. I just tune into whichever channel I need for each task. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overwhelming his professional reserve. "When you learned these languages, did you study them separately or simultaneously?" "Simultaneously," Lily replied matter-of-factly. "I noticed that learning similar words in different languages helped me remember them better. Like water in English, mizu in Japanese, agua in Spanish. Once you see the patterns, it's easier to remember all of them together." Marcus felt a chill of recognition as he processed the implications of Lily's explanation. She hadn't just learned multiple languages, she had developed a cognitive methodology that allowed her brain to process linguistic information in ways that neuroscience barely understood. The child who had saved his company was revealing herself to be not just exceptionally intelligent, but genuinely revolutionary in her cognitive abilities. Charisse entered the laboratory, carrying coffee for the research team. Her new role as Foundation Executive Director having transformed her from service worker to collaborative partner in these academic investigations. The past 6 weeks had been like living in a dream. Their new Tribeca apartment, Lily's rapid integration into Dalton School's advanced programs, and the growing recognition that her daughter's abilities were historically unprecedented. Mrs. Washington, Dr. Santos said warmly, "We're documenting teaching methodologies that could revolutionize language education globally." Lily's approach to simultaneous acquisition challenges fundamental assumptions about how the human brain processes linguistic information. "She's always been special," Charisse said proudly, though her voice carried notes of concern that Marcus had learned to recognize. "But sometimes I worry that all this attention might change her." Marcus understood Charisse's apprehension. Lily's remarkable abilities were attracting notice from universities, government agencies, and international organizations eager to study and potentially exploit her unique talents. Protecting her childhood while developing her potential was proving more challenging than anyone had anticipated. "Dr. Santos," Marcus interjected, "what's your assessment of Lily's current linguistic capabilities compared to adult native speakers?" "In Japanese, Korean, and Mandarin, she tests at university graduate levels," Dr. Santos replied. Her Spanish and French approach native adult fluency, while her Portuguese and Arabic are advancing rapidly toward conversational competence. Most remarkably, she's beginning to demonstrate intuitive understanding of linguistic families that she hasn't formally studied. Lily had returned to her translation work, but Marcus noticed her attention shifting toward a conversation between 2 visiting professors who were speaking in what sounded like German. Her eyes lit up with the familiar expression of intellectual curiosity that he'd learned to recognize as the precursor to another breakthrough. "Excuse me," Lily said politely to the German professors. "Are you discussing Indo-European root structures in Germanic languages? Because I think I understand what you're saying, even though I've never studied German formally." "Utum." The professors stared at her in astonishment as she proceeded to demonstrate comprehension of their academic discussion, inferring meaning through her understanding of linguistic patterns from related language families. Marcus realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, not just language learning, but genuine linguistic intuition that bordered on the supernatural. Dr. Mitchell immediately began documenting this spontaneous demonstration. "Lily, can you tell us how you're understanding German without having studied it?" "It shares roots with English, and the sentence structures follow patterns similar to other Indo-European languages I know," Lily explained with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "Once you recognize the systematic relationships between language families, you can make educated guesses about meaning even in unfamiliar languages." Marcus felt his business instincts engaging as he recognized the commercial and diplomatic implications of Lily's evolving abilities. If she could intuitively comprehend unfamiliar languages through pattern recognition, her potential value for international communication was incalculable. But that recognition came with protective concerns about people who might want to exploit, rather than nurture, her remarkable gifts. "Dr. Santos," Marcus said quietly, "I think we need to discuss security protocols for these evaluations. Lily's capabilities are becoming too valuable to leave unprotected." Before Dr. Santos could respond. Lily had moved to a computer terminal and begun typing rapidly in what appeared to be multiple languages simultaneously. "I'm creating a comparative analysis of the German conversation for my language learning journal," she explained. "If I document the pattern recognition process, maybe other students could learn to do this too." The selfless nature of her motivation struck Marcus with familiar force. Even as Lily discovered capabilities that could make her one of the most valuable linguists in human history, her primary concern remained helping others learn more effectively. The purity of that dedication was both inspiring and terrifying, given the potential for exploitation by less principled individuals. Charisse had been watching this demonstration with growing unease. "Lily, sweetheart, maybe we should take a break. You've been working for 3 hours straight." "I'm not tired, Mama." "This is really exciting," Lily replied, but she obediently saved her work and stepped away from the computer. Her consideration for her mother's concerns remained as strong as ever, despite the revolutionary academic environment she was now navigating daily. Dr. Santos gathered her research materials with obvious excitement. "Mr. Chen, Mrs. Washington, we're documenting linguistic capabilities that could redefine our understanding of human cognitive potential. I'd like to arrange consultations with neurologists and cognitive scientists to better understand the physiological mechanisms underlying Lily's abilities." Marcus nodded, but his business experience was raising red flags about the expanding circle of academics and researchers becoming aware of Lily's exceptional nature. "Dr. Santos, I want all research data classified as confidential foundation material. No publications or presentations without explicit written consent from Mrs. Washington and myself." "Of course, but Mr. Chen, discoveries of this magnitude have implications that extend far beyond any individual foundation. The scientific community will learn about Lily's abilities when we decide it's appropriate and safe," Marcus interrupted firmly. "She's still a 7-year-old child, regardless of her intellectual capabilities. Her welfare takes precedence over scientific curiosity." Lily looked up at the adults with the perceptive expression that Marcus had learned indicated she was processing subtext and implications beyond her apparent years. "Are you worried that people might want to use my abilities for bad things?" The directness of her question silenced the room. Marcus realized that Lily's emotional intelligence was developing as rapidly as her linguistic capabilities, making her increasingly aware of the complex motivations surrounding her newfound prominence. "Some people might want to," Marcus admitted honestly. "That's why we're being careful about who knows the full extent of what you can do." "Like Mr. Tanaka wanted to use fake contracts to steal money?" Lily asked, demonstrating her understanding of how exceptional abilities could become targets for exploitation. "Exactly like that," Charisse said, moving protectively closer to her daughter, "which is why we're working with people like Mr. Chen who care about you as a person, not just what you can do." "Und es—" Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling more heavily on his shoulders as he recognized that protecting Lily would require more than academic security protocols. Her abilities were becoming so extraordinary that maintaining her safety while developing her potential would demand resources and vigilance that even his wealth might struggle to provide. But as he watched Lily return to her language analysis with undiminished enthusiasm, Marcus realized that the greatest discovery wasn't her linguistic genius, it was her character. Despite capabilities that could revolutionize international communication, she remained the same compassionate child who had learned Japanese to help her overworked mother. The challenge ahead would be ensuring that the world's growing awareness of her abilities didn't corrupt the values that made her truly exceptional. Because the biggest revelation of all was yet to come. 3 months later, Marcus Chen stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York, watching as 8-year-old Lily Washington prepared to address representatives from 193 countries in a demonstration that would change the course of international diplomacy forever. The girl who had exposed a $400 million fraud by reading Japanese contracts was about to revolutionize global communication in ways that no one could have anticipated. "Delegates of the United Nations," Lily began, her clear voice carrying through the Assembly Hall's advanced audio system. "I want to show you how we can eliminate language barriers that prevent countries from understanding each other." Marcus felt his heart racing as he witnessed the culmination of months of preparation and discovery. Since that first evening at Le Bernardin, Lily's abilities had evolved from remarkable to genuinely supernatural. Dr. Santos's research had documented linguistic capabilities that challenged fundamental understanding of human cognitive limits, while Charisse had watched her daughter adapt to global attention with the same grace she'd shown while serving water glasses in restaurants. Lily activated the presentation system, displaying a complex document written in Arabic. "This is a trade agreement between 3 Middle Eastern countries that has been stalled for 2 years because of translation disagreements. Each country's interpreters understand the words differently, creating conflicts that prevent cooperation." She began speaking fluently in Arabic, her pronunciation so perfect that several Middle Eastern delegates leaned forward in surprise. But when you understand the cultural context behind the language choices, the real meaning becomes clear. Marcus watched the audience's reaction as Lily switched seamlessly between Arabic, English, and French, explaining how subtle linguistic nuances were creating diplomatic misunderstandings that could be resolved through more precise translation methodology. Her analysis was sophisticated enough to impress professional diplomats while remaining accessible to observers without advanced linguistic training. The word commitment in Arabic carries different cultural implications than the same concept in English or French, Lily continued, now addressing the assembly in flawless French. "When each country hears commitment, they're interpreting it through their own cultural lens, rather than understanding what the other countries actually mean." Secretary General Elena Rodriguez, who had initially been skeptical about allowing a child to address the General Assembly, was now listening with obvious fascination. The demonstration was revealing translation problems that had frustrated diplomatic efforts for decades, while providing solutions that seemed remarkably achievable. Lily switched to Mandarin Chinese, addressing the Chinese delegation directly about specific sections of the trade agreement that were causing the most significant conflicts. Marcus watched their expressions transform from polite attention to genuine amazement as they realized this 8-year-old was not only speaking their language fluently, but demonstrating understanding of Chinese cultural perspectives that most Western diplomats never achieved. "If we establish international translation protocols that account for cultural context rather than just literal word meanings," Lily said, returning to English, "we could prevent many conflicts that arise from simple misunderstandings." The Russian delegate raised his hand. "Young lady, you speak of cultural context, but how do you account for political motivations that influence interpretation?" Lily's response came in fluent Russian, demonstrating understanding not just of the language, but of the political implications underlying the question. "Political motivations exist, sir, but they often hide behind translation disputes because it's easier to blame language barriers than admit to disagreement about substantive issues. Clear communication forces honest discussion of real problems rather than artificial conflicts." Marcus felt pride and concern warring in his chest as he watched Lily navigate complex political questions with wisdom that seemed impossible for someone her age. The past 3 months had revealed that her cognitive development was accelerating beyond any documented precedent, raising questions about long-term implications that no one could answer. Charisse watched from the gallery, wearing the elegant business suit that had become her uniform as executive director of the Washington Foundation. The transformation from restaurant server to international foundation leader had been dramatic, but her primary concern remained unchanged: protecting her daughter's essential nature despite unprecedented global attention. Mrs. Rodriguez, Lily addressed the Secretary General directly, the Washington Foundation has prepared detailed proposals for improving UN translation services using the methodologies I've developed. But the most important change would be training interpreters to communicate cultural context along with literal translations. Secretary General Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. Miss Washington, your proposals merit serious consideration, but I must ask, how do we ensure that such advanced translation capabilities serve humanitarian goals rather than political advantage? The question addressed concerns that Marcus had been grappling with since Lily's abilities became widely known. Governments, corporations, and organizations around the world were beginning to recognize the strategic value of her linguistic genius, creating pressures that could easily overwhelm a child, regardless of her intellectual capabilities. That's why Mama and Mr. Chen established the foundation as a public benefit corporation, Lily replied, with characteristic directness. The goal is helping people communicate better, not giving anyone unfair advantages. If everyone has access to better translation tools, then no single country or company can use language barriers to exploit others. Marcus realized that Lily's answer revealed the most remarkable aspect of her development. Despite capabilities that could make her incredibly wealthy and powerful, her motivation remained focused on helping others rather than advancing her own interests. The values Charisse had instilled during years of struggle had proven stronger than the corrupting influences of fame and recognition. The Japanese delegate, who had followed the Tanaka fraud case closely, addressed Lily in Japanese. Miss Washington, your intervention in exposing Mr. Tanaka's crimes has led to arrests of similar fraud networks in 4 countries. Do you see linguistic expertise as a tool for preventing international crime? Lily's Japanese response was so fluent and culturally appropriate that several delegates exchanged impressed glances. Language barriers often help criminals because victims can't understand what they're agreeing to. Better translation services could prevent many frauds that hurt individuals and damage trust between countries. The broader implications of her observation struck Marcus with sudden clarity. Lily's linguistic abilities could revolutionize not just diplomacy and business, but law enforcement, humanitarian aid, cultural exchange, and virtually every aspect of international cooperation. The 8-year-old addressing the UN was potentially the most valuable human resource on the planet. Mr. Chen, Secretary General Rodriguez, addressed Marcus directly. The United Nations would like to discuss formal partnerships with the Washington Foundation to develop the programs Miss Washington has outlined. Marcus stood, feeling the weight of decisions that would shape not just Lily's future, but potentially the course of international relations. We welcome that discussion, Madam Secretary General, but any partnerships must include protections ensuring that Lily's childhood and education remain the top priorities. Lily had been listening to the adult conversation with the intense focus that Marcus recognized as her processing complex implications and formulating responses. Secretary General Rodriguez, could the UN help us create educational programs so other children can learn languages like I did? There are probably lots of kids around the world who want to help their families communicate better. The essential generosity underlying that question reminded everyone in the assembly hall that they were dealing with a child whose primary motivation remained helping others, despite her extraordinary capabilities. The purity of that dedication was perhaps her most remarkable quality. As the session concluded, Marcus realized that the journey that had begun with a fraudulent contract in an upscale restaurant had evolved into something none of them could have imagined. Lily Washington had transformed from a 7-year-old helping her mother serve tables to an 8-year-old addressing world leaders about revolutionizing international communication. But the most important transformation was in himself. Marcus had discovered that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or possessions, but in the opportunity to nurture authentic human potential. Lily's remarkable abilities were important, but her character was extraordinary. 6 months later, as Marcus watched Lily teaching a group of refugee children how to learn new languages using her pattern recognition methods, he understood that saving his $400 million from Tanaka's fraud had been the least significant part of their story. The real victory was proving that exceptional human potential existed everywhere, waiting for the right combination of opportunity, support, and recognition. Charisse joined him in observing the class, her pride evident as she watched Lily patiently helping a 9-year-old Syrian boy understand English pronunciation patterns. "She's still the same little girl who wanted to help me with Japanese customers," Charisse said softly. "She's exactly the same," Marcus agreed, "and that's what makes her truly extraordinary." The little translator who had exposed international fraud, had become something far more valuable. Proof that authentic excellence combined with genuine compassion could indeed change the world, one conversation at a time. And in the end, that was the most important translation of all.